Hey, right, I'm sorry that I didn't get a video out on Wednesday. As you know, I've not been very well, and I really wasn't up to it at the beginning of this week. I would like to say a big thank you for all those people that have contacted me inquiring about my welfare. I really do appreciate it. It's nice to know that I was missed. Now, I'm not quite firing on all four cylinders yet, so what I thought I would do today is, something... Actually, I've been meaning to do this for about 3 weeks, but there were various developments going on. I wanted to see how they panned out. Plus, I was busy with the Super Meteor, and I only had a limited amount of time to get the content together that I needed for that. There is one more video to come, which will come next week. Sort of a comparison with the Interceptor that everyone's been asking for. Now, as you will know, if you've followed this channel for the last couple of years, one thing that I am particularly worried about is the assault on the motorist, and that includes motorcyclists, with various governments across Europe, including the UK, looking to get rid of internal combustion engines, and various councils around the UK basically making it impossible for people to travel around in motor vehicles. Sadiq Khan and his expansion of the ULEZ zones, and of course low traffic neighbourhoods which are popping up everywhere around the country. Now, the ban on the sale of new petrol cars, 2030 here in the UK and 2035 in Europe, is starting to fall apart. And I'll get onto that in a few moments. Also, these low traffic neighbourhoods and the expansion of the ULEZ zones are not going as planned. Basically, we're starting to see a huge pushback against these policies. I reported a few weeks ago that Sadiq Khan had been accused of manipulating the figures sort of extracted from a public consultation to facilitate ease, basically, for him in pushing these new ULEZ expansions into place. Very undemocratic behaviour. You ask your democracy what their opinion is, they give it, you don't like it, so you sweep it under the carpet and pretend it never happened. Remember that, because that's going to come up again in a moment. And then we've got the Oxfordshire Council that has basically proposed that they're going to split Oxford up into 6 zones. Each household will be given a pass, which will cover members of that household for 100, let's call them transgressions, moving into other zones per year. Once they've used those 100-day passes up, they'll be charged a £70 fine for moving across the borders, so to speak. So if you've got a husband and wife that both have to go to work and they both have their own cars, and let's say a teenage son or daughter who also have their own cars, that means that each member of that household will only have 33-day passes to last them a year, which isn't really going to work for your average working family. Now, I'm not going to get into the intricacies of this because I've made an entire video on it, but it would appear that the Oxfordshire Council have been up to very similar tricks to Mr. Khan, with allegations of corruption being levelled at them again surrounding a public consultation, which it just seems to be the way that these councils operate nowadays. Now, there is also an allegation that there is a report which was put together as part of a survey on the effect that these changes are going to make. And this particular report threatened to scupper the plans, so they buried the report and didn't publish it. Because, well, they just wanted to go ahead with it anyway, whether it works or not. Now, I've been reporting on all these issues for the best part of 2 years now because, I've been very worried about this assault on personal freedom because, make no mistake, that's what it is. And I wanted to raise awareness, and of course there are other channels, not necessarily motorcycle channels, but there are other channels that are also bringing this to light. And it would see that it's starting to pay off now, because people are pushing back, and they're pushing back very hard. Now, we've got these low-traffic neighbourhoods which, as I say, they've popped up all over the country, particularly in London. And it basically means that, motor vehicles are banned from using certain roads at certain times of the day. Of course, this is sold to the public as being some sort of, idyllic existence, no traffic on the road, so your children can go and play football or tennis in the middle of the road, whatever they want to do. And it's going to improve their quality of life, or at least, that's how it's sold to people. The reality of this is people can't get to work, and people can't have important goods delivered to the homes, because obviously the delivery people that's delivering your new washing machine or your Amazon delivery, or even your tradesman that's coming to fix your plumbing, don't want to receive a hefty fine for coming to your house. And I could go on and on and on about that. Furniture deliveries, large household appliances, builders, people that live in those areas, their lives are going to grind to a halt. Now, I'm not going to express or any sort of opinion or condone other people's actions, but what I will say is the things that certain members of the public have been doing are a symptom of local government overreach. Now, what a lot of councils have been doing to enforce these low traffic neighbourhoods is they've been putting large wooden planters up in the road to block access for motor vehicles, because obviously, pretty flowers in a big wooden planter are far more preferable to being able to go to work so that you can put food on the table, or even have a cooker so you can cook that food. And these planters have in some cases been disappearing, or at the very least they've been moved, and in other cases members of the public have been setting fire to them and burning them down. Now, of course, these councils have been very shocked and they've replaced them, but then the same's happened again. And I'll tell you now, as long as they go ahead with these silly ideas, that kind of behaviour is just going to continue, because if you threaten people's way of life, they will resort to desperate measures. They have no choice. Now, we have some city councils complaining that, they set up ULEZ zones and they've generated millions of pounds in revenue from fines through drivers, driving through those zones in the wrong sort of vehicle. But people are refusing to pay. In fact, I think one city council reported that so far this year there have been 40,000 refusals to pay, and they don't have the resources to enforce those fines, so they've had to write them off. And then we've got Mr. Khan with his ULEZ zones, or the expansion of his ULEZ zones. Several councils that are affected by his expansion have refused to allow him to put cameras up. So the ever-democratic Mr. Khan has used sort of, shall we say, sneaky measures and loopholes to put them up anyway. And as quick as he's putting them up, people are snipping the wires that, make them work, or the spray painting over the lenses. And as quickly as he has them repaired or reinstalled, they just do it again. Now, Mr. Khan's a bit upset about this, and I have to say, I can't believe the hypocrisy of this guy after what he's done. But then I suppose that's how a dictatorship mentality works. Obviously, he's branded it as criminal behaviour, but he's quoted in a newspaper as saying, "One of the joys of living in a democracy is that you can oppose things and do it in a way that is loud, vocal. You can have petitions and protests, but you have got to stay within the law. You have got to make sure that your protest is peaceful and lawful and safe." Well, they tried all that, Mr. Khan, and you just ignored them. The public consultation made it clear that they didn't want any of this. So you tried to manipulate the figures, and when that didn't work, you just ignored that. It would seem that democracy only works one way as far as Mr. Khan's concerned. Right, let's get on to the important bit. The European Union has had to do a bit of a U-turn on the demise of the internal combustion engine. Now, I've made lots of videos on this subject. In 2035 in the European Union, it will no longer be legal to sell an internal combustion engine motor car, that's petrol or diesel, with motorcycles to follow some time after. You know, what they were basically saying is that vehicles sold after that date must be zero emissions, i.e. nothing coming out of the tailpipe, and the only way to achieve that is not to have a tailpipe and make that car or motorcycle electric. Very probably the silliest idea that any politician has ever had. And this is all in pursuit of that worldwide policy of net zero. Now, Mr. Johnson, when he was in power, you know, just to sort of keep up with the Joneses, implemented a same mandate, but he brought it forward by 5 years. So in 2030, from a certain date, it will be illegal to sell a new motor car or light goods vehicle which is powered by petrol or diesel here in the UK. Now, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we reached a watershed moment on this issue. Now, granted, for the moment, this only affects the European Union, but it's going to have a sort of ricochet effect around the world. Bear with me. Now, for several years, they've gradually been sort of drafting up legislation to make this happen in 2035. And everyone in, or should I say, every government in the European Union agreed to it. They're going to put the whole population in a position that, you know, they're not going to be able to travel hundreds of miles, then be able to quickly refuel the cars and continue the journey or turn around and go back home. They're going to force them to have electric vehicles, which are substantially more expensive than the internal combustion engine motor car. The way that the batteries have to be manufactured means they are substantially more damaging to the environment than an internal combustion motor car. They have very short ranges with extremely long refueling times, and that situation just gets worse when the weather gets cooler. And of course, as we all know, there's no guarantees that you're even going to be able to find somewhere to refuel it. Now, this was all agreed, I think, about 3 years ago, but of course the bureaucrats in Brussels do like their paperwork. So it's taken a long while for, you know, the draft to become reality, and it was ready for signing off as legislation 2 or 3 weeks ago. But during the interim period, I think reality has started to sink in with some countries, and the political landscape in Europe has shifted, with the sort of political status quo, if you like, changing substantially in Italy last year. More recently, something similar has happened in Holland, and leaders of certain other countries have realised that their position perhaps isn't quite as secure as they always thought it was. Now, my understanding of the way that, you know, the European Union works is that 32% against vote will veto any proposed legislation. And when it came to the signing off of this legislation, 4 countries opposed it. 3 of them I'm not surprised about, you know, Italy, Bulgaria and Poland. The 4th was a bit of a surprise, Germany. Net zero is causing a lot of damage to people's lives, and it's got the German government a little bit worried. Now, between them, these 4 countries amount to, I think it was 44 or 45%, so that effectively vetoed the European Union's plans, unless they could come to some agreement. Now, certainly where Germany and Italy is concerned, this isn't just a thing about human rights, the right to travel, the freedom to travel. It's economic as well. Both have large motor industries. So in both cases, the economy was going to be hit very hard by the demise of the internal combustion engine. I mean, really, it should never have come to this in the first place, because the most sensible solution right from the start, as I've said in previous videos, is to adapt and improve the current technology that we have, not just scrap it and change over to another unreliable, expensive and unproven technology. But of course, politicians don't think like us. Now, I don't think that Italy's motor industry really needed to put much pressure on the government, because their government is very much against these ridiculous agendas in the first place. But it's clear that Germany's motor industry has put a lot of pressure on their government, as have the people. Uptake of electric vehicles is going to be very slow, and people are going to hang on to their old internal combustion engines until they become unviable. And in that interim, these industries are gonna go bust. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. So what the Germans proposed is that they could continue to allow the sale of new internal combustion engine vehicles, providing they're able to run on e-fuels or biofuels. Very practical people, the Germans. This means that they can continue to sell internal combustion engine vehicles with very little modification. And sustainable biofuels, or e-fuels as they're now referring to them, that technology has been around for a long time, at least 30 years that I'm aware of. But the impetus hasn't been there to, develop it and make it mainstream, because fossil fuels are cheaper. So there are going to be some drawbacks. It certainly initially, these fuels are going to be more expensive. They're probably not going to be as efficient, but they are problems that can be solved. Now, the whole point of these fuels is that they don't add to this perceived CO2 problem. The plant derived, so it makes them sustainable. Burning them only releases as much CO2 back into the atmosphere as the plant took up while it was growing. That qualifies these biofuels or e-fuels as being truly sustainable. The only issue that I can see is that for the amount of fuel that's going to be required, an enormous amount of land is going to be required to grow the crop to provide the fuel. And at the moment, of course, we've got various governments around the world trying to put farmers out of business, and we're going to need them more than ever. Now, this just makes so much sense, and to be quite honest, I think it's going to put the electric vehicle out of business. These vehicles are still going to be available at a reasonable cost compared to their electric counterpart, and they don't need any additional infrastructure to be put into place to allow them to run. Your average petrol station is quickly and cheaply going to be able to adapt to these new fuels. And so I believe market forces are going to make the decision on how we go forward from here. The European Union is a huge economic force, if nothing else. So any other country that decides to continue the pursuit of electric vehicles when these biofuels are available, and I'm talking about the UK here, is not only going to be out of step with the mainstream, they're also going to look very foolish. Large companies that provide the infrastructure for electric vehicle charging are going to have to think twice about investing in the installation of that infrastructure. Because although, I admit there is a place for electric vehicles in some households, the majority of people are going to go for the internal combustion engine and the use of biofuels. The UK government and other governments that still have this agenda on the books are going to have to do a U-turn at some point, because it's simply not going to work. Not now that the European Union has made this decision. And that decision went into the statute books last week. Now, I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know the intricacies of what's involved, but I would imagine that existing internal combustion engines can also be adapted to run on biofuels. So as petrol and diesel become scarce, there is a lifeline there for people that own older vehicles. Now, it's not over yet. You know, a lot of things could happen, but I think this is a significant turn in the right direction. For those of us that cherish the ability to travel long distances when we need to or when we want to, with the ability to be able to refuel quickly and continue on those journeys or return home. It'll be interesting to see how other governments manage this sudden turn of events, but I predict that within the next year or so, you know, especially here in the UK, there will be a similar U-turn to this sort of technology rather than the reliance on electric vehicles. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. You can, if you wish, also show your support through the super thanks button down below the video here, or through Patreon or PayPal. Either way, thanks for watching. Now, I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please leave a like and feed the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, and if you do subscribe, hit the notification bell and ensure that your notifications are enabled. That way you will be informed whenever I upload a new video. I will hopefully be back next week, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.